Politics, we are at the desk. I'm your host, Katie Karkanig, and today's episode, we will be talking about the protests occurring currently in Iran and the future of political parties in the U.S. and the long-lasting impact protests have had on society over the years. Now, come take a seat with us at the desk. Welcome back to ATD. First, it's time to send it over to the politics panel to discuss the ongoing protests in Iran. Over to you, Vita.
Thanks, Katie. Protests continue in Iran as there have been an estimated 20,000 to 30,000 total deaths. Despite violence in the country, President Trump has concluded nuclear talks with Iran in Geneva today to reach a deal. Today, we also examine the future of political parties in the U.S. as the country remains divided. So, Ryan, what role do you think the U.S. and the nuclear talks will play in a possible transition of regime change, if there is to be one at all?
Well, I also don't know if there's going to be regime change at all. I mean, Trump said weeks ago he would strike Iran if they use military force against their protesters. And they say about tens of thousands of people have died since then, and there's been nothing. So now it's all about their nuclear program, which Iran is the only thing apparently Iran will discuss on. They won't talk about capping how many ballistic missiles they have or disarming their proxies in the region. It kind of seems like Iran is stringing Trump and the administration on a little bit. But I think ultimately Iran will kind of have no choice but to make a deal just because of how dire the sanctions we've put on their country have been. They're economically crippled, and I think their only way out is to kind of make a deal with the U.S.
To be clear, if the United States makes a deal with Iran, that will be one of the biggest failures of this Trump administration. They have shown no credibility in creating any deals with any country, especially the United States. You look back to 2003, you look back to 2016, both times when we've lifted sanctions or given them the opportunity to kind of govern themselves when it comes to nuclear programs, and they have gone behind our back and other countries' backs in the deals over and over again. And then to your point, this Trump administration said, if you keep protesting and they're going to start killing you in the streets, we're coming to help. And we didn't do it. It's just a total utter failure right now. And a deal would just be prolonging a collapse of this regime.
Yeah, I agree. And what's the deal to make if we supposedly obliterated their nuclear arsenal? The whole thing is just such a mess. And at the end of the day, it's all a cover up for the Epstein files. I think it's just another distraction and another smokescreen.
I mean, all they have right now is the agreement to share drafts of a potential deal, which doesn't really sound like a whole lot of much right now.
Well, I mean, that's where everything starts. Iran is trying to come to the table here, and there's been some negotiations, and we have to start on what's going to actually be talked about. And I think we can look at these protests as a tool of the Trump administration towards making an agreement on a nuclear deal. You look at the comments that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has made. This is part of the maximum pressure campaign. They made it so that the rial would drop in comparison with the dollar, so that Iran could not import things that they need for everyday life or for domestic production. And that's what is hurting the shopkeepers in Iran and what drove them into the streets in December. Now we've seen, after almost 3 months of these protests, and Iran's kind of feeling the heat. And I think that's why we're seeing them come to the table and work on negotiations. And you're looking at some of these other things. I think the main thing that the Trump administration and U.S.'s vital interest is concerned about is the nuclear program. At the end of the day, we don't want to see Iran get a nuclear weapon. And so looking at it through the lens of a bargaining chip towards making sure that doesn't happen is, I think, how we have to look at these protests and some of these other red lines that the administration has put down.
And sorry, to your point, Sam, I think it could be argued that there has been some progress in the past couple of months. I mean, previously, Iran was absolutely shutting down any possibility of verification. And recently, President Masoud Pezeshkian agreed to verification being a possibility in this nuclear deal. Wouldn't you consider that a major step forward?
It is a major step forward, but when I look at this point, I'm looking at it from a humanitarian perspective. And the fact that these people have been protesting in the streets, and then we said we were coming to go help them, and we're not going to do it. And then let's say we come to the table, we make a deal with them. All these people that wanted regime change, they're still your leader. They just watch you protest them and go after them. What happens to the people in Iran when we cut a deal with them, hypothetically, and there's nothing for them in the deal necessarily? We don't govern them. They have the idea. And to the point of we're coming to the table with the deal, at the same time, the Ayatollah is on X tweeting out, more dangerous than an aircraft carrier is a weapon that can send it to the bottom of the sea. And he says that the U.S. Army is the strongest army in the world. And the strongest armies in the world must sometimes receive such a blow that it can't get back up. I mean, at the same time as we're having a conversation about a deal, we're also having threats by the government themselves.
I mean, they always talk tough,
But
whether it be on social media or they want to uphold a certain level, I guess, of excellence of their leadership to their population, even if they don't even believe in it. But really, what's stopping them from a couple of years down the line when this deal, or if there is a deal, expires? They're just going to start enriching uranium again, and we're going to be back at square one.
Well, I think we've seen a lot of creative solutions be brought up to kind of work towards a deal. I know something previously over the summer that they talked about was making sure that these facilities are in Saudi Arabia or another third-party country so that they could not enrich past a certain amount, because while Iran would run these facilities, while they would be the ones operating them and then importing them into Iran for their civilian program, it would also have the oversight of the Saudis, of third parties, so that they would make sure that this doesn't move past a certain level. Because at the end of the day, what we want to see is not escalation towards war. I mean, this is different from Iraq. If you look back at the regime change war we pursued there, we were able to topple their government, but they also had a quarter of the size of the population. And they had terrain that was much easier for the United States to come in. So we don't want to get drawn into a war, and we want to see a deal happen. And what we need to do is set up, opportunities for Iran to de-escalate, for them to come down and make sure that we have protections for their population, that they're not being so authoritarian, and opening up to the West so we don't have them moving towards our adversaries like Russia and China.
Well, are we going to look at this from an American perspective or an Iranian perspective? Because from America, we can say that we don't want war, so let's not get involved. Let's make a deal. Let's make sure that they're not building nuclear weapons. But then on the other hand, like I'm saying, if we're looking at it from an Iranian perspective, from a humanitarian, from a world perspective, there's so many people being suppressed in this country that if we're not paying attention to that, it's like, what do we want to cover? Do we want to, create quote unquote peace, but then leave these people hanging to dry? I mean, that's the conversation that we can have. And to what we've seen in the past with the Trump administration, with Venezuela, and now we have talks about Cuba, I don't know if the people are necessarily the best interest of the Trump administration, as much as they usually go at first and they're like, hey, the people are what we want. But at the end of the day, what really it seems is the fact that China buys 80% of Iranian oil, and that in this deal, that would help that while also covering the nuclear deals.
You led into my next discussion point. Like, what do we think is fueling this pivot? I mean, as we discussed a couple weeks ago, the Trump administration had a very strong stance against the regime and the Ayatollah, and now we're seeing kind of a possibility of negotiations. Is oil the driving force in this conversation?
I think we've seen it time and time again that with the Trump administration, oil is a very leading thing. But at the same time, they also took out a dictator in Venezuela. So like they're kind of teetering the line of they want to push democracy throughout the world while also getting the best economic benefit for ourselves. So, but they're not going 100% in either direction. So they really have to like take a step back and see the full picture and figure out which way they want to go. But to the point of what I'm also saying is we can't spread ourselves too thin. I mean, we have all of our troops now with our largest carriers in the Iranian area. But we also have Venezuela to fix. We have Cuba we're at the table with. I mean, how much can we do while also covering American topics?
Well, I think a big problem too is the possibility of just further destabilization. I mean, say no deal materializes, we strike Iran, Israel is going to want to be included in this military action somehow, and then it just all falls apart from there. How do we make a deal or move forward without while maintaining peace in the region as we know it.
I mean, Vita and I
Is
talked
that in their
about
best
this off
interest?
air, but there's people chanting in the streets that they want Pahlavi, which his father was the Shah before he was outran. But Pahlavi has never been a leader in his entire life. He was exiled. He's never really even lived in the country. And his dad was huge on censorship and private police. So what's to say that he comes in like, is this the better option? I don't know. I don't think that necessarily is a great option either. Trump was on the record saying that he doesn't know if he has enough support, and that's probably true. Because what besides being born into being a descendant of someone who led the country, what credibility does this guy have?
Right. I think ultimately, too, Iran is a country that has historically struggled with maintaining and upkeeping democracy. And as we know, historically, I think it could be argued that U.S. intervention has only further destabilized countries that have historically struggled with democracy. So I think I don't know if the Trump administration is trying to defer themselves from intervening in the social aspect of the Iranian people and at the expense of ignoring the protests and the brutality that's happening and solely focusing on the nuclear deal, or what is expected to happen.
Yeah, and we're in no position to help Iran right now. Like, look at the United States, especially from what the Munich Security Conference has shown. We are very isolated right now. We don't have the help to help Iran. And we have aircraft carriers in Venezuela. And at the time Trump announced that we were going to defend Iran. And if Iran started killing, we would start fighting back. That was the same time where he brought up all this talk about Greenland. So we lost those European troops because they were protecting Greenland. So we have isolated ourselves a lot. I just don't think we're in the position to really.
I just think the most likely outcome here is that this isn't going to benefit the citizens of Iran.
Right, and that's a big thing. But then if we're just going to look at it from an American standpoint, which we do a lot of the times, will this deal potentially benefit us? Cut off China, help some of our allies potentially if they agree to us knowing what they're doing with nuclear programs, and also cutting off their oil supply to China. That would help. That's the only benefit I see. But from the people perspective, it just doesn't seem like a good idea.
So how do we foresee a solution that is beneficial primarily to the people?
I mean, for the people, I think there's only one answer. I mean, we've surrounded them. We have our largest aircraft carriers there. Our military is very capable of taking down the regime very quickly.
You are in support of military intervention on behalf of the U.S.?
If they have a leader or an idea of what's going to happen next after, yes. But if they don't have an idea, then no. But
we saw that in Afghanistan, and that exactly is what led to the Taliban being able to take over within 2 weeks.
Which is the problem with invading in a lot of these countries. Usually once we invade or anyone invades, it gives opportunity for terrorist organizations to come in, especially with Iran's deep tie, especially this government's deep tie to terrorist organizations. They fund over $1 billion to terrorist organizations all over the world per year, annually.
I mean, it's kind of. I totally lost my train of thought. That is my bad.
The United States right now is in no position to really help anyone else, and there's no end vision, or Trump doesn't really have a plan of what he wants with Iran afterwards, which is it's all just scattered. I don't really think there is an end goal. I think it's just to distract from the Epstein files. I really, really do. And it's not making us look good at all, on the world stage. This Munich Security Conference was really concerning, just from everything that other foreign leaders said. Even the EU Higher Rep of Foreign Affairs, Kaja Kallas, she said to the United States directly, she said, even in the jungle, animals cooperate. We are losing our allies. So how can we,
Well, I think the goal's been very clear here. The entire administration has been towards a maximum pressure campaign against Iran. They've been saying that under no circumstances should they get a nuclear weapon, and they'll do whatever they need to do to bring them to the table. And I think, just today they were negotiating. They came to an agreement on what they're going to talk about. And we saw an outpouring of support from our allies in Europe, from the Gulf states, from Turkey. These players that have a vested interest in maintaining regional stability are saying this is what we need to do. This is the path we have to go down to do this. And that's why you saw, the UN Secretary General saying, this is a good move by the Trump administration, by Iran to come to the table and not have this conflict, because that's not going to benefit the Iranian people. What's going to benefit them is, ending this brinksmanship over this, development of nuclear weapons, and, getting to a place where they're able to remove some of the sanctions and a lot of the secondary sanctions on other countries that are trading with Iran, so that they can have, an opening to the world market and rebuild the Iranian middle class, because that's what brought down the Shah, was the destruction of a lot of these shopkeepers that was upholding the Iranian economy. And that's exactly what's happening today. So if the Iranian regime does not, move towards making a deal, then they might suffer the same fate that the Shah did.
I just feel like the United States isn't going to deliver. And look at all of these people in Iran who have died because of Trump's empty promise, saying that he was going to help them immediately, but we didn't even have the aircraft carrier ready. And I just think I just think it's not going to end well. And in terms of foreign powers, we're very rocky right now. And even Canada said that China seems like a more dependable long-term partner. In what world is Russia our friend and Canada our enemy? Everything's just upside down, and I just don't see anything ending in a positive kumbaya state.
Right.
I really don't.
There is a lot to continue talking about that, and ultimately I think all of us can agree that we want peace for the Iranian people. And as an Iranian, there is nothing more that Iranians want right now in this moment. But moving on, political future of the United States. We are obviously in a very still divided country. And this has been an ongoing thing that has only increased in the past couple presidential terms. So do we believe in a two-party system that will uphold American democracy, or is a multi-party system needed for the future?
I mean, a multi-party system, I think, is absolutely needed, but I don't even think the people of the United States can even envision such a system happening. I mean, the amount of money that just goes into these two parties, unless there's serious governmental change, it really just might be Democrat-Republican for the next however many decades.
Right. I mean, for the foreseeable future, it is Republican and Democrat, whether we like it or not. But I do believe that right now what we are seeing is we're seeing those two groups get so radically far apart to the right and to the left, where we are starting to get a centric middle. And what I will say about this whole thing, though, is right now the Republican message necessarily isn't the most popular, with Trump's approval rating being rather low. And in the midterms, that might show that it's good for the Democrats because people are voting necessarily against Trump. But in 2028, do the Democrats have a strong enough message, which they don't right now, but will they come up with a strong enough message to actually run on something that isn't just hating on Trump and isn't just, we're just the opposite of that? Can they convince the people that, when Trump is gone, that they have a strong enough message that isn't, let's just reject what Trump says?
Well, I don't know if the American right is going to embrace MAGA post-Trump, or whether it'll stand to tell. I mean, the Democrats won't have to run on a position of Trump bad if Trump isn't going to run like he was supposed to, or like he is supposed to. But like you said, they don't have a vision right now. They don't have messaging, and they lack kind of just one leader right now. I mean, there's a lot of time until 28. Anyone can pop up, but right now we're not seeing much.
Yeah, I feel like we just need to get through the midterms.
Yep.
That is the focus right now, making sure the midterms happen in the way that they normally do, especially with the SAVE Act and everything happening right now. There's a lot of craziness. I just think we need to stay focused on what is happening ahead right now in the front mirror and just make sure everything there runs smoothly.
Well, it's a difficult position for the Democrats to be in, because we do know that in 28, they're going to be campaigning on basically what is a continuation of an anti-Trump platform, because that's all they're going to have, right? Trump has been in power for the past 4 years. Presumably Vance or someone from his administration is going to be, the nominee for 2028 for the Republicans. So they will be continuing that kind of anti-Trump messaging. And I don't think that's going to be as compelling as you see compared to some of the people like Zoran, who's able to present a vision where he has actual beliefs and actual policies. Now, his ideology is not going to apply and will not be able to win over the whole country, because that's a very different situation in New York, where you're able to run on a farther left platform. But, President Trump and the Republicans have presented a vision that's won, the popular vote in 2024, which makes it a lot easier for people to see, like, this is what I want to see in the country. And they can look at that and what he's done and say, that's what I want to see for the future of the country, compared to a vision that's just purely against that. Makes it a lot more difficult. Until they have someone that can develop their own platform that's going to appeal to the rest of the country, they're going to find themselves in a difficult position in 28.
I mean, the Democrats have to do two things. First of all, they need to stop. Like, obviously, you're going to go after Trump. He's in power, but that message clearly doesn't work. And then second of all, they need to go for the biggest issues.
I mean, didn't it work for Zoran Mamdani, though?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it works because he was running against a conservative with sexual assault allegations that ran it. I mean, a Democrat that ran independent, and then a conservative who has a lot of baggage to come along with that. But then the second part of this would be you need to be running on the biggest policies. The Trump administration going into this election, they ran on immigration, they ran on border security, they ran on affordability, and the Democrats ran on social issues. And it is seen to not work time and time again. And this time, the Democrats have to come to the table, like you're saying, with a vision of the biggest issues that don't just affect the minor, and they need to spend the most time on that and then focus on the social issues and the minority groups after they get their biggest messages across to win an election.
It's just my worry is that the Democratic Party, they're going to overestimate how much drop off there is to support for the Republican Party when Trump is eventually gone. I don't think J.D. Vance, like I said, will have the pull that Trump has, but where Democrats will see this and just put in another establishment them, and we're going to repeat this entire thing over again. But 4 years from now, I can't blame them for going on the anti-Trump kind of attack, sort of like they were in 2020 or 2024. I know it didn't work then, but you had an entire generation that didn't see 4 years of the Trump presidency that were then able to vote. And I think after these 4 years, which are a lot wilder than the first Trump 4 years, people will start to see that.
Yeah, that approval rating's 32% right now for Trump. So I honestly think saying Trump bad might be a pretty good ticket to get somewhere in the future. We just need to win these elections first. The Democrats do.
Right. Well, that is all the time we have for the politics panel. We will continue to follow Iranian citizens and their pleas for regime change. Back to you, Katie.
Thanks, Vita. We are once again back at the desk. It is time to send it over to the history panel to discuss the history of protests. Over to you, Nikolai.
Thanks, Katie. Protests have been an extremely prevalent part of society that has existed as long as society has existed. When people face injustice within society, protesting is done as a way of showing objection and disapproval to what is going on. Protesting has changed a lot over time, and we'll be exploring that here today. Each panelist will be talking about protests from a given century, discussing what caused the protests and how they changed society. We'll be going from the 18th century all the way to modern day to see how protesting has evolved. Let's get started. Okay, guys, welcome. History panel is set.
It's good to be back.
We are
We're
back
back.
here today, and we are talking about protesting.
Yes.
It's a very important part of society,
Extremely.
which has caused so much events in history that we'll be discussing here today. So we starting with me. We'll be starting with.
Isn't that convenient?
Yeah, you're gonna hear me talk even longer.
Oh,
We're gonna talk about the 18th
Right.
century. 18th century, I would describe it as protesting tyranny. There's kings were prevalent during this time. And this was a period where people started to smarten up and realize maybe king rule isn't the best. So there was two I focused on, from the French Revolution and the American Revolution. Now, the French Revolution, that started because, I'll just say this, 3% of people decided 97% of people's decisions. The commoners in France, they had no political power. They were poor. They had no bread. They had nothing because the French, the noblemen, the clergy, they had all the power at the top, and they could vote out the commoners. So then the commoners made a decision. They were going to form the National Assembly as a way of protesting this. And it led to several protests, including the storming of the Bastille and also the Women's March on Versailles, where thousands of women marched all the way to Versailles, where King Louis XVI, he had this extravagant manor for him. They marched there and they forced him out of Versailles into Paris as a way of showing, hey, we mean business and we're here to stay and we're here to, have a voice. So, and it caused so much. It also led to a lot of destruction. King Louis lost his head.
So the guillotine did a lot more persuasion than I think.
Yes.
I would definitely agree with that for sure.
So yeah, he lost his head. Because they got too radical and they're like, we want a full, no more kings. He needs to die. So that's kind of what it led to. And it eventually worked. French no longer, there's a kingship there. So very extreme measures, but it led to no more king in France, led to a republic. So there's that. And there's also the American Revolution. I'm sure we're all familiar with that. Without the American Revolution, we wouldn't be here today.
This is
Yeah.
true.
So
Exactly.
Wow.
exactly, yes. So colonies, they were very upset with Great Britain, all those taxes, because, they spent so much in the war, the French and Indian War, and they had no money. So they started taxing the colonies, the tea tax, the sugar tax, all these taxes, and the colonies were fed up. They were done with Great Britain. And it led to some protests, including the Boston Massacre, where colonists were on the street protesting. It led to violence. It led to a lot of colonists losing their lives, which further caused more chaos. And there's also the Boston Tea Party, of course, which was protesting the Tea Act, where
Lauren knows all about the Boston Tea Party,
Oh,
don't
do I?
you?
Oh, I'm aware.
Yeah.
I remember. Where they dumped 342 chests of British tea into the Boston Harbor.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tea Party.
Where they did not crash into an iceberg. In case if
Nah.
anyone
That
has
is
happened to be
exactly-
In
confused
case you
about that,
confuse the Titanic and Boston Tea
we
Party.
just want to clear that up for everyone right now.
Yeah.
No icebergs during the Boston Tea Party, but a lot of tea.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm sure you all know what this led to. Independence, a Revolutionary War, and we declared independence from Great Britain, and now we are the United States of America.
Really?
And yes,
Nope,
fun
didn't
fact.
know that.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
So yeah, these both I see were very large protests in the history of the world, really.
Yeah.
And it got rid of tyranny still exists in Great Britain. Doesn't anymore. The kings are there, but they're just mascots basically. Somewhat.
It's not wrong.
Somewhat.
Interesting term to
Not
describe
probably
it.
wrong term.
Mascots.
But So-
how many shows are there about royals?
so the end of tyranny and
Woo.
republic. So that's those are mine.
Awesome.
Yes. Okay.
So let's move on to the 19th century. That would be you, Lauren.
I did not do the 19th century. I did the 18th century. I thought I did the 1800s.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Oh
it's the
wait. Oh wait.
That's
That
the
is the
19th
19th.
century.
Oh well. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
It's been a while since we've been back, people.
Yeah,
Just give
guys,
us a
this is
second.
very last
We're
minute,
stretching. We're getting used to
Yeah.
it.
Okay. Let's forget that. Okay. So I did two specific protests that happened that like changed the face of the United States. So the first one I did was in 1831, Nat Turner's Rebellion. So enslaved people resisted slavery and the harsh treatment and the lack of freedom. So Nat Turner led a rebellion in Virginia where enslaved people fought back against their slave owners. Due to this caused like tensions between the North and the South. And this strengthened the abolitionist movement, but it also helped with things leading to the Civil War and eventually ending slavery in 1865. So this was one of like the most important acts in the United States to end slavery. Another one that I chose is the Haymarket Affair. So this is about workers and how they protested about long hours and low pay and unsafe working conditions. They protested in Chicago and like violence broke out, like how protests are, the police were involved, different things like that. But this brought attention to everyone about workers' rights. And this led to having 8-hour work days and helped grow labor unions. So this improved working conditions in general for the United States and everyone who works in it. I also have one more that I just had to throw it in there. So the Seneca Falls Convention, this was women protesting for equal rights, including the right to vote. And I just wanted to point this one out because it was very important. It led to the women's suffrage movement and helped women get the right to vote in the 1920s. So those are the ones I chose in the 19th century. So,
That's great. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, I see the trend there is like fixing
Really
some of the
helpful.
big problems within
Yes,
society.
it was
Yeah.
a century for fixing major problems in the U.S. Maybe we gotta backtrack to that and start fixing stuff again.
Perhaps, yes.
You're leading
maybe.
the protest, current day protest?
Yeah, I'm gonna start a protest.
Lauren's rallying everyone.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Well, we'll get to modern day soon, but first, let's turn it over to Peter here.
That's the 20th century. So if we can get yes. My century was another full of violent protests, something that was necessary at the time to overthrow, not kings this time, but dictators, regimes that allowed their people to suffer for really no reason, simply for lining their own pockets and allowing for their own selves to be in power. Starting with that, we're going to go with the photo on the left, which is the famous Tank Man photo, otherwise known as the Unknown Protester or the Unknown Rebel, which is from the Tiananmen Square massacre in June 5th of 1989. Now, obviously, what we have here is a student standing in front of a column of Type 59 tanks and halting their progress. When this happened, reporters were stationed across the street in a high-rise hotel in Beijing and had a clear view of the event. Obviously, this is one of the most famous photos from that, but what had happened was the student came out, stood in front of the tanks, and shifted before them, not allowing them to go forward, after which he climbed onto the lead tank, spoke with PLA members, and then walked off. This has become symbolic of the massacre as well as the movement which started it, which really was for students and the people of China at the time, the people of the Republic, to gain more democratic freedom, which was at the time oppressed. And it led to really this becoming one of the most iconic photos of not just the 20th century, but being well known beyond that, and the word of not just the tragedy, but also the movement and further scrutiny upon China's government at the time and forwards to explode onto the mainstream and the international news. The second photo is something just as impactful, considered once again to be one of the most impactful photos of the century. This being, and excuse my pronunciation, Tukwanduk, self-immolating himself during the Vietnam War. This was in protest of South Vietnam and their treatment of the Mahayana Buddhist monks and the oppression of them due to the, Ngo Dinh Diem regime, as the leader was a staunch Catholic. He would go on to persecute and drive out most of the monks, and this caused this monk in the photo to self-immolate himself in rebellion of the regime. This caused many, many copycats, not just in Vietnam during the war, but also in the United States, many of whom did not understand the cultural significance of it at the time, nor really afterwards. We've had, I believe, 3 copycats here in the United States, many of whom would set themselves on fire in front of one at the Pentagon and many others at important government facilities. At the time in Saigon, many people did not understand what was happening and chose to ridicule the act as opposed to take it for what it was, which was an act of rebellion against a regime that thoroughly oppressed its own people. And that was the 20th century, which was pretty heavy, and I think leads interestingly into the 21st.
Yeah, that
Leads to you.
that was a lot. It does. I was not expecting all of that. Anyways, I did the 21st century. So first, starting off with protests against the Iraq War. The Iraq War started in March 20th of 2003 and ended December 15th of 2011. A lot of people honestly thought that this war was unnecessary, and also parts of it were illegal. There were a lot of different doubts regarding intelligence on Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction. People believe that the Bush administration was actually lying about a lot of the weapons that they had, thus people seeing the war as ultimately unnecessary. Also, there was a lack of international support, and it was seen by illegal from many other countries because it lacked a UN Security Council mandate as well. There were a lot of anti-war organizations that were first formed from the first invasions in Afghanistan that also went forward and then protested this war. Europe actually saw the highest number of protesters, and there were actually pro-war groups that supported the war as well, but they were ultimately outnumbered by people with anti-war propaganda. Then I wanted to talk about something called the May Day protests. These are protests that are held annually on May 1st, which is International Workers' Day, and they kind of protest for or protest against, advocate for anti-capitalism, globalization, and labor rights. And it kind of merges like immigrant rights and like worker advocacy together. So this is something that actually happens every single year. Unfortunately, a lot of the protests often do turn violent. Back in the 2000s, there was an incident where graffiti was sprayed all over a statue of Winston Churchill because usually the protests happen in major cities such as London, DC, New York, LA, and Berlin. But something that I read about this that I thought was really interesting is there's something called guerrilla gardening that people do where protesters will go around and they will plant just plants and like public green spaces where technically you're not supposed to touch it because it's like public area, but they basically just go around and they just plant plants everywhere in illegal spaces as a form of peaceful protesting.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice you end with peaceful protest.
Yeah.
Peaceful protesting.
Yeah.
Something nice to end with.
Yes.
What I like to talk about is kind of this difference between non-violent and violent protest, and the effect it's kind of had. I know non-violent can really make more of an impact, but non-violent, can leave just as an impression. So,
Yeah.
Anyone got any thoughts?
I mean, I agree a lot with what you said, and I mean what I just said based on like the gardening. I think sometimes it really is just kind of like some people say like pen is mightier than the sword, but I think there is a really big power that comes in everyday life from being tactful instead of knowing what to say. It's kind of when knowing not to say anything, I think that silence can be just as powerful.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like sometimes, like people always say when silence, sometimes being silent is saying more than like actually fighting back. And I think especially now, like in the century that we're in, sometimes people think that being silent is just like being okay with what's going on, but sometimes that's better than causing more violence and different things like that.
Exactly. Here.
I'm on the fence.
Oh.
I agree that peaceful protest has its place. The late Jesse Jackson, who died today, did a lot of really good work with anti-consumer protests and really barring money from going to the institutions that really didn't help his own people, as well as throughout history, we've seen many, and more recently than not, I'd say, we've had many, many instances where peaceful protest does make good traction, and it does very well. But at the same time, we still face a lot of the injustices, and we still easily forget many of the things that we struggle with due to the amount of time it takes to properly go through each and every exhaustive piece of red tape in every channel in order to get what we need done. That many times, I'm not condoning violence, I want to make that very clear. Many times it requires action that speaks beyond just legislation. The two photos that I had up are iconic from the century for a reason. They speak to an inherent human need to do something about what they feel is wronging them, not simply to talk about it within their own circles, within their own organizations, within their own ability to punch above their weight legally.
Yeah.
And I feel that many a times it calls for maybe not looting, maybe not, pointed violence, but action.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think I'm a little on the fence about.
Yeah, there's a difference between violence and action, though.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's very good points from all. I'm also in between because violent acts probably have an impact overall when you look at history, but nonviolent acts, causes much less problems and can also lead to much more efficient results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Well, that is unfortunately all the time. Well, that's unfortunate. Protesting has changed significantly throughout the years, and will continue to change because as long as society exists, protesting will too. Back to you, Katie.
Thanks, Nikolai. Sadly, that is all the time we have for today. In the meantime, stay updated with ATD on all our socials at PSU at the Desk, and let us know what you want to see us cover next. I'm Katie Karkenegg, and we will see you back at the desk next week.
Thank you.